All right, well, good morning. This is always my favorite time to speak at an InMode conference because I know that if it's 11:20 on a Sunday morning, then everyone here is a diehard because you made it through last night, you made it through Sunday morning, and everyone here is here because you really want to learn and you really want to get the most for your business. The other thing that I know is that everyone here is passionate about what you do. Am I right? Everyone is passionate about your patients, you're passionate about your craft. And of course I know that because you wouldn't be sitting here if you weren't. But I also want to ask everyone here, how many of us are passionate about managing our business finances? Okay, we've got one person. Another person, okay, we got a couple. Not a whole lot in a pretty packed room. And most of us don't, right? Business finance is super boring. It's not, playing with lasers and looking at cool before and afters. I mean, it's not the sexy stuff. But every single one of us in this room is here because we want to make money with aesthetics, right? We're in the business of aesthetic medicine. So we want to know, how can we actually make money with this? And to do that, we have to know business. So I'm one of those weird people who enjoys doing business finance. So I want to take a couple minutes here to break it down, simplify it, so that all of you who are excellent at what you do, you're all fantastic providers who are passionate about your patients. I want to give you some easy tools so that you can manage your business effectively. So a little bit about myself. I'm the CEO of Hartwater Brands, which includes Hartwater Aesthetics as well as Hartwater Wellness. And I'm the executive director of our Educational and Research Institute. In our aesthetic practice, we have 7 InMode devices, so I've been through the ringer of determining whether or not it's a good idea to buy them, and I keep buying them over and over and over again. So I want to talk about a few fundamentals of business. What are some key reasons or key things that we need to remember when we're managing our business finances? The first one, and this is something that should be, kind of an easy one, but it's something that we often forget, which is be intentional. And I think that's a very overused word these days, but I think it's really important to remember that we have to understand why we're doing things. So many of us, when we're making big financial decisions, we're like, oh man, fingers crossed, I hope this works. If I believe in myself, it's going to work. No, we have to know why we're doing something. And to do that, we have to have metrics. Now, metrics, yes, they're boring, but you have to have them. They have to be easy to understand. They have to be replicable and actionable. You have to be able to do something with them. And so the second point is you have to be strategic. You have to know, once I have the data is just data. I now have to do something with it. So I have to understand how to put that into action. And the final point is we have to utilize our money effectively. One of the main things that I see with business owners, especially in the aesthetic space, but across really all industries, is one of the biggest reasons that people fail when you start a business is you have money and you don't use it correctly. You waste it or you don't use it enough, right? So we have to make sure we're using our money to its full capacity. Don't step over dollars to pick up pennies, right? Sometimes we get so hyper-focused on pinching pennies, we forget that we can actually make more money with it if we utilize it. But then the flip side is, just because we spend money doesn't mean we're going to make money, right? A lot of people are like, oh, you got to spend money to make money. Got to spend money to make money. But we have to know, if I spend it, is this actually a good way to make money? So how do we do that? Okay, so the most important thing, and this is a key concept in corporate finance, we have to understand the value of our investments, okay? Value is a really important concept in finance because it's different than just how much money you have. Value is about how much is your money worth, okay? And that's a really important distinction I'm going to go into a little more. The second part is make it a science, right? Everyone in here is technically a scientist, right? If you're a provider, you are hyper-focused on the science of the treatments you're doing. So why aren't we being scientific about how we're managing our money? Now, the main thing that we all want to know at the end of the day is the equipment we're buying actually making us any money? Right? Some of us here are utilizing equipment. We don't really necessarily know what the value is. Some of us are looking at new investments here, looking at purchasing more machines. So I want to go through a few steps that are going to let us identify in a scientific way if our investments that we've made or are going to make are returning us more money than we paid for them. So step one, diagnose your investment. So this is a users meeting, so I'm going to assume everyone here has bought at least one InMode platform, right? So I want to talk about how do we know, once we've purchased it, how do we know, was that actually a good decision? So what's the main metric that we all use when we're talking about investments and making money off of those? Return on investment, right? Everyone knows ROI. Everyone talks about it, right? So I'm going to use a really simple ROI calculation here just to kind of walk through what we basically already know. Let's say we've bought a $100,000 piece of equipment. We put down $5,000 down payment. Let's say now I go back, I look at the cash flows that I have, and I see, okay, I've made 25 grand every year just off of this device. So over the course of the life of the equipment, let's say we have a 5-year loan, we've made $125,000, which is a 25% ROI. Is this a good investment? Well, if I take this to my financial advisor, what are they going to ask me? They're going to say, what's the net present value on that investment? Who here knows what net present value is or has even heard of that? Anybody? Strangely enough, net present value is an extremely important financial metric that we all forget about or we've never even learned. So I'm going to take us through a really quick crash course on NPV because NPV is the most important financial metric that you've never heard of, okay? This is kind of high-level MBA type stuff. I'm going to try to simplify it as much as possible so you can actually utilize this. Okay, so what is NPV? Why is it important? So NPV tells us what our investment is expected to generate in excess value beyond the initial cash that we're putting out to get that investment, to buy that investment. Okay, and it also takes into account that time is valuable, right? So the time of my money has value. If I spend money now, it's worth more right now in my hand than it is 5 years from now. And then we look at the value of the investment. Okay, so I'm going to use a really simplified analogy here. But if I took out a $100 bill right now and I said, this is on deep discount, I'll sell it to you for 25 bucks. How many people here are going to be like, ugh, I have to talk to my accountant, I'm not really sure. No, of course we all are going to take that deal because we know intuitively that's a good deal. Why do we know it intuitively that that's a good deal? Because we know that a $100 bill has an objective intrinsic value of $100. So if I pay you $25 for it, I've immediately gained $75. So the idea of net present value is to determine what is the intrinsic value of the investments that I'm buying. And we use that in, for example, stock investing. We want to find stocks that are discounted. They're worth more than we're paying for them. And we can use that concept in purchasing technology. The great part is, once you've done a thorough NPV analysis, it gives you a result that's either positive or negative. If it's positive, it's mathematically certain that that investment is making more money than you've paid for it. So I want to use that same example that we used, the $100,000 piece of equipment, okay? So it costs us $100,000. We put down $5,000. With NPV, we actually are only concerned with the cash output right now. So that $5,000 is all I'm concerned about, because that's the cash I'm taking out of my pocket right now and giving to you for that equipment. And then we're including all those other things that we forget about, right? We're including interest, depreciation, inflation over the course of 5 years. And then I'm also taking into account that my money is taking up 5 years of its time being tied up in this investment. So I'm using all of that to calculate what is going to be the results of this after 5 years. What is that money worth right now? So that 25% return on investment is actually worth negative $2,700. So I would actually have more money now if I had never bought that equipment at all. So that's how ROI can trick us into thinking we're making a good investment when actually it's not. Now, everyone here is a user, so I'm sure everyone is thinking now, well, I already bought it, so I can't really do anything about that, right? So I want to take some time to think about, okay, how do we, if for example, we've already bought it, we want to diagnose that and see, is it making us money? And if it's not, don't freak out. There's ways that we can make it positive. And it's all about the cash flows. Because cash flow is the one variable in here that you can't necessarily predict with mathematical certainty. The cash flows are the money that you bring in, right? So we can predict cash flows, but we can't know for certain. But we want to think about how much revenue can I bring in? What are all the costs associated with it? That's cash flow. Pretty simple, net calculation, right? So what I've done, because I want to make this really, really simple for you guys, I've actually, if you scan this QR code, I have a net present value calculator that's going to do all of this for you, because I don't expect that you're going to go in and start doing these complex financial analyses, but I want you to be able to actually do these calculations. So scan that. I would highly recommend it. It's actually great not just for in-road equipment, but for any investment that you're looking at. You can use NPV as a great metric. But we always start with cash flows. So cash flows is the number one thing that we want to look at. I'm using the example of an Optimus platform because it has lots of different cash flows on it. We want to look at what is the minimum expected cash flows, not the dream ideal world cash flows. We want to think minimum. If I'm doing the absolute bare minimum in my practice, what am I expecting I'm going to generate? Because if you can prove the minimum as a positive investment, then everything else is just gravy. So be conservative with that. But the great thing is, with this calculator, you can actually just plug in all of your different cash flow sources and find out, okay, what's going to be my net cash flows on that? And then we can plug it back in. So let's use a more realistic example here with an Optimus. Let's say we're buying an Optimus for $250,000. We're putting down a 10% down payment, so the cash out of my pocket right now is $25,000. And I'm looking at what are all of the different things that are going into it. And this is actually the real analysis that we used when we first purchased our Optimus device. So I calculated the minimum cash flows that we could get with all of those different revenue streams was $88,000 per year on that piece of equipment. And for $250,000, if you take in all of those factors, it actually generates a positive net present value of almost $100,000. So we know that the minimum that we're going to get is a positive on that NPV. So basically, that $25,000 down payment is buying that $100,000 worth of money. So I'm buying it at a discount here. And the internal rate of return is telling you that for every dollar you put into this project, you're expected to bring back double the investment every year. So here's the kicker, the cash flows. How do we actually make sure that those cash flows are making us a positive investment? So once you've diagnosed your investments, okay, let's say we've gone back, we've said, okay, here, I've done all of the analyses, I figured out whether or not it's positive. It's either going to tell you, okay, great job, you're returning a positive return, or, hey, you got to step it up, you got to improve your cash flows. Either way, we always want to optimize cash flows. So I want to think about what are some strategies that we can use to actually tangibly improve the cash flows that we're bringing in so that we can get to a positive NPV or increase the value of it. So one of the most important things that I've seen in our practice is synergistic value. And this is a really important concept in corporate finance because it's something that we use, for example, in mergers and acquisitions. If we're looking at acquiring another company, we're not just looking at the revenue streams and cash flows that that company has itself. We're also thinking, okay, how might those cash flows complement the cash flows we have in our current organization so that we have a synergy of value, so that it actually increases both cash flows by combining them together. So on a smaller scale, we see this with, for example, combination therapies, which we've talked a lot about this weekend. So in our practice, we have a protocol that we are pretty well known for. We've given some talks on this more specifically, but the combination of Morpheus8 with Sculptra has been a really important combination therapy that has really shown us the importance of synergistic value for improving cash flow. So this example, just to give a really brief overview, so let's say we're doing Morpheus8 with Sculptra. They work really well together because they're both done on a monthly basis over the course of 3 months. We do them together. But the problem is, it's a really expensive treatment. So for example, most of our patients are doing 2 to 3 vials of Sculptra per treatment, plus the cost of a Morpheus package, if you're selling that all up front together, it's a pretty big price tag. So we split it up. We sell the Morpheus package first, and then we discount the Sculptra vials, $100 per vial, if you combine it with the Morpheus. So it's an interesting thing, right? Because we're actually losing money, or not losing money, but we're reducing the amount of money we're getting from the Sculptra vials, right? Versus doing it independently. But when I started running through the numbers, what I saw was that independently, the patients who were doing injectable Sculptra treatments without a Morpheus package, typically the protocol we recommend is a course of 3 treatments. But 55% of those patients who were only doing Sculptra were getting 1 Sculptra treatment and then being like, oh, I actually like the results, and then they would fall off. Or 33% of them would come back for 2, and then they're like, oh, I'm okay, I don't need the 3rd. So we're actually losing money with those patients who fall off. But then when we combined it with the Morpheus 8 protocol, 98% of patients completed all 3 Sculptra treatments. So we've discounted $100 a vial. Let's say it's 3 treatments of 2 vials. So we've lost $600, but we've increased the value. So we have separately a 55% chance it's going to be a $4,300 cash flow. But if we combine them together, we have a 98% chance it's going to be $5,700. So just by putting them together, we've increased our cash flow by 30% just by combining them. Now I want to talk about long-term value, because the most important thing in our industry is retention. A patient who comes back over and over and over is going to return so much more value than a patient who comes in once and never comes back. So how do we create long-term value on our treatments? So here's a few, pretty simplified metrics that we use in terms of evaluating the cash flows that we're getting from our patients. Okay, so one, for example, usage index. This looks at how consistently customers are using the product category compared to the average in the industry, right? So we're looking at the average number of purchases they're making divided by the category purchase rate. Okay, the other one is share of requirements. Are patients coming to you for everything in their aesthetic wallet? Okay, what is your share of their wallet? Are they going other places for things that you don't offer, for example? So think about making sure that you're capturing everything in order to retain that patient for as long as you possibly can and provide them with a roadmap of where they're going with you so they can see a long-term vision. So that's a really important thing in terms of creating long-term cash flows. And the last part that I'll close with is once you've created those cash flows, you will see the return. Okay, so I want to go back to the Optimus example that I used earlier. So I mentioned that this was the Optimus example that we used when we first purchased our Optimus. Okay, so it was a great NPV. It made it a no-brainer for me to get the investment, right? It's a 99, whatever return on a $25,000 down payment. Now, if I go back and look at what the actual returns were on that, I can look and see, okay, we took that minimum expected cash flow, and we took steps to make sure that we were improving those cash flows in reality. So what did we get? Well, the actual result was that $25,000 that I put down in 2022 was actually buying $4.8 million of value. The internal rate of return, we said 100% rate of return is every dollar doubles. This is a 4,500% internal rate of return. So if you actually do take steps to improve those cash flows, you really can improve the value that you're getting over the course of the life of that equipment dramatically. So the last thing I'll leave you with is make sure that every business decision you're making is done with a scientific mindset. Use data. Don't just do it on a hope and a dream. Understand why you're doing it. And if you do, you can understand where you can improve. And if you know where to improve, then you can dramatically increase your returns. Thanks a lot.